Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Pensado's Place. We have got a giant for you. Imagine your resume saying Boz Scaggs and Rod Stewart and Marvin Gaye and Chicago and just so many more, Steely Dan. You'll meet Bill Schnee in just a second. Hit us up on our socials, like and subscribe, click notify, and we will get back to you. And now, without further ado, here's Bill Schnee.
And Bill, my friend, thank you so much for joining us, and particularly letting me talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
We talked before the show a little bit, and so I'm a little bit nervous because you're someone that I'll just say it out loud. I stole so much stuff from you, but creatively. So I know what to ask you, and I know where I have some gaps in my thievery. So, my friend, we have a lot in common. I think that great engineers like yourself have very similar qualities in some ways. We're a little bit nerdy. We're a little bit geeky. We love science. We love math. We love the processes as much as the results. And for your generation and my generation of engineering, it's the journey, not the destination, that's important. And you've had a wonderful journey. And today I'd like for you to share some of that. If I can start you off with your love of Henry Mancini and the Beach Boys, and how did that lead you to a great record that was your first record that was a success, the Three Dog Night record. And it's a beautiful story. And I think guys at home watching this is the career arc that you want. Creativity is a fleeting thing, and you're about to hear from Bill. If I ever shut up, you're about to hear from Bill. This is the longest question in history, but Bill, give us a little hint in terms of how that process led you to your career and the preparedness that you got for it.
Sure. Well, like a lot of guys that do what we do, I started in a band. Senior year of high school, started a band with some mates, and we did some demos. And one of the band members' mothers knew someone who knew someone that was in the music business, and that someone was Gary Usher, who was close friends with the Beach Boys and Brian. He wanted to be a Beach Boy, in fact, but he actually did write In My Room in 409 with Brian. And so he heard our record, our demos, and he had a new deal with Decca, and he gave us a singles deal, which is back in those days, that's where you went in and you cut 4 songs. Hopefully there's a single in there, and they'd put out 1 or 2 of them. And if you managed to get a hit, you run in and do 6 more. Suffice it to say that we only did 4 songs on Decca Records. But he had brought in a guitar player to augment the band on our first session, a guy named Richie Podler, an absolutely astounding musician. And as I found out later, an astounding engineer and producer. And he had a studio. So after we got dropped, I went over to visit him in his studio, and I told him the sad story that we'd been dropped. And he said, "Whoa, you guys are great. I can get you a record deal. Go see this guy, Mike Curb. He's going to go places."
Wow.
And I guess he was right about that. And so I went and we signed with Mike Curb, and Richie started producing us. And here for Decca, we had recorded at Capitol, Studio B, and United Western, 2 of the best studios in Hollywood at the time, and still maybe today. And yet when I went in to Richie, we cut our first track. I came into his control room, which was a funky little studio with a homemade board, not anywhere near as nice looking, but the sound that came out of those 604s was an aha moment for me. I instantly, in that 2 minutes and 35 seconds or whatever that was, it just struck me hard. And I turned around and said, "Can you teach me how to do all this?" And he said, No, I'm teaching Cooper. Get out there and do another take. But that was the moment. So the band fizzled. So I found my way to a Mickey Mouse studio where I could learn, hopefully. And it was Mickey Mouse. They had egg cartons on the wall in the studio for sound absorption. We had a 8-channel mixer with no EQ and a Fisher Space Expander spring reverb for reverb, 2, count them, 2 condenser mics. And but everything was 2-track, everything was live, and that part of it was great. because I was forced to do things all at once. And I was very fortunate that I met a guy named Toby Foster, who was very technically oriented, and he ultimately was working at Whitney Studios in Glendale. And I would go every day. I was back in school now, back in college, having wasted 2.5 years on the band. And I would go every day after school and just pummel him with questions. And he was very patient, and he would take as much as he could until he couldn't take it. And he'd say, okay, good night, see you tomorrow. And lo and behold, all of my aptitude was in math and science. I mean, I actually started college in aerospace, but I dropped out right away. But where the music and the technical stuff came, engineering just came very easily. And so 2.5 years, a little over, after I had been in Richie's studio as an artist, I was able to talk him into hiring me in the studio. And it took 2 months of solid begging to get him in the studio, let him get me in the studio. And it was a demo. I did the demo, and in the morning, those days, you'd have a publishing company come in, you'd record 4 or 5 songs very quickly, throw vocals on them very quickly, mix them very quickly, make a mix very quickly, and off went, make, to send out to artists to try to get their songs got. So I did one the first morning on Screen Gems, and I called that afternoon. What'd they say? Said, you were great. Okay, so what about now? And he's, well, there's another one tomorrow for Warner Brothers. Come and do those demos. Same thing. Then I said, how'd I do? They said the same thing. Okay, what now? He said, all right, come tomorrow night and record Three Dog Night. I went, sure. What? Three Dog Night at that time was one of his 2 biggest artists. He was engineering Three Dog and Steppenwolf for their common producer, Gabriel Meckler. And to this day, why he would turn over his biggest client to a snot-nosed kid, where if I had fallen on my face, which fortunately I didn't, if I'd fallen on my face, it would have been very embarrassing for him. But he threw me in the deep end of the pool, and I managed to swim, at least the first couple of nights. So first night, called him the next day. Yeah, Gabriel said you were great. Keep going. Okay. Second night, same thing. Third night, I got in trouble. They wanted some effect on guitar, which undoubtedly Richie, being the phenomenal guitar player he was, had always gotten for them, and I couldn't do it. So he came down and took over. But that was it. That's how I got in the door.
That's a great story. Hey, guys, this story and many more stories can be amplified and found in Bill's new book, and we'll talk more about that later. But I just want to prepare you and remind you that a lot of good stuff and information in that. So I know you get so many questions about Steely Dan. 2 of my favorite albums are definitely Asia and Gotcha. Gotcha? Did I say Gotcha?
Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
And so I'm going to ask a different question. There's a rumor that's been going around since the beginning of time that when Asia was being worked on, that an assistant got a phone call from his girlfriend while he was cleaning the tones at the head of the tape and erased a year's worth of work on Asia, got fired, and has never been seen since. Is that true?
It didn't happen anywhere near me. And I thought that was on Gaucho, though.
Oh, okay. I thought it was on Asia, but it did happen, huh?
It's on Gaucho, and it's a very sad story. I didn't know he was on a phone call, but it doesn't much matter at that point. I'm sure it was exit stage left.
Yeah, and because of that, the rumor continues that that's why we put the tones at the end of the tape rather than the beginning of the tape.
Yeah, well, a lot of people were already putting them on the end. That's not an uncommon story. There, I mean, I had that happen on a session in a studio in the 70s as well, where the tones were at the head, and the maintenance man came in and was printing the tones, and he wasn't paying attention, and it went through the leader right into the next song, and he took out the first 45 seconds of a song.
Yeah, I know you're gonna hate me, but I hate tape. It's just I hate biasing the tape machines, but I love the sound of it. So anyway, go ahead.
Took me. I was an analog dog, to be sure. It took me a long. I just couldn't stand the sound of early digital. 1644.1 with the converters and filtering systems that were back then. It was just god awful to me. But today it's a whole nother story. A whole nother story.
I agree. One of the things that caught my ear, I guess kind of figuratively and literally, is that I'm a paraphrase a saying that I read of yours. It's that mixing, and you consider mixing an integral part of the performance. And so I interpret that as you feel, and I feel the same way myself. I didn't realize it, but we are part of the performance through the engineering and our skills engineering. We can enhance the performance, we can ruin the performance. And can you amplify that and maybe give me an example, if you can think of one, of how that helped a song?
Okay. So, when I started in the studio, at Richie's, they had just gotten 8-track. And Richie, as I said, I can't say enough about Richie Podler in terms of musician and engineer. But back then, and since I started in a 2-track studio where you mixed everything live, there was no remix. But Richie taught me when I was working there that, to start, even though it's 8-track, you're starting the mix now. So when, whatever you're doing, you're listening and trying to make it sound like the record from the beginning, and keep that up. So as we went on into 16 and 24-track, that's what I did. Some engineers would mix in edits where they would mix, so much and then and cut it together. I'll never forget, I was working at Scorpio Studios in London, and the first Supertramp album, which I thought was an outstanding sounding album,
absolutely,
was mixed there. And they told me that it was mixed. He would come in at midnight when all the sessions were done and start, and he would reset the board exactly where it was and mix another 8 or 16 bars and then tear it down and come back the next night. I was the exact opposite of that. I wanted the mix to be a performance. So, and I have absolutely no dexterity, no physical skills in anything except with faders on a console. And I was able to move very quickly and do a lot of things, including, I didn't like Dolby. So in those early years, I would, if a fader wasn't working, wasn't playing, if the music wasn't playing, I'd keep the fader down until it played, and then I'd reach over to do that. And that kind. So it was a journey I went on for the length of the song, and tried to make the mix a performance. In fact, when it first started with computer help, which was the moving faders for me, it took me a while to let the thing help me, because
it couldn't help you.
Yeah, it was fighting me. And I finally had to learn it to be cool with it, and that got me in starting to do it piece by piece, a little more of the piece by piece kind of thing, which is a lot. It's funny enough, the record making has gone that way too now, obviously, because whereas when I started, let alone when Al started, everything, when Al started, everything was a performance. They were out there, he mixed it, went on tape, and it was done. But as time has gone on, of course, now, with everyone and multi-track with Pro Tools, we assemble. A performance is actually assembled. And it's not that one thing is better than another. I like them both. One of my favorite things in my career is not that well known, are the direct-to-disc records I produced, where we did one whole side of an album, start to finish. Yeah. That's something for young people to try to check out sometime. Is the two best ones were Thelma Houston and Pressure Cooker, and James Newton Howard, who's gone on to become one of the top film scorers in the world. But those were amazing, because you literally started with song 1 and blazed through it. And of course, the hardest part of that is that when you mix from tape or from hard disk, whatever, you pull up the guitar, the vocal, the drums, it's the exact same sound, when the exact same dynamics every time. But when you're mixing live, the guy on the second cut, it's not going to be the exact same thing it was when you ran the pass down before. So it's really a challenge where you're constantly mixing.
Tell me if I'm describing this correctly. Well, you know what, you could do a better job. Start us at at the process where you're skipping making a 2-track tape or a stereo bus tape, a stereo tape, and you're actually going straight to the record itself. Now that's not going to be the final product, but it's going to be what the final product is made of. And can you explain the pressure that you have to not make a mistake?
If you're talking about the direct-to-disc records, there's tremendous pressure, and it's and I don't know that everybody I had was at the top of their game. It was the best band in 1975 you could put together. The two best guitar players, two best drummers, Jim Gordon and Jim Keltner, Dean Parks and Larry Carlton, just on and on and on. It's three incredible keyboard players. So, mistakes from them wasn't an option. And I don't know that I would call what might happen mistakes, but obviously the mixes, since they varied and I was playing catch up all the time, would vary. And when you picked a master, you were picking all, in that album, I think 4 sides. You're picking all 4 songs, because you can't take song 1 from a performance and add it to song 2 and 3 from another, and so on. The performance is the whole side of the album. And there was a very funny thing actually on the Thelma Houston one, because the second side, the last song on the second side was "Got to Get You Into My Life," the Beatles song.
Wow!
And the side was just magic. Everything was working. Everybody had been at the top of their game. I was even happy with my mix the whole way. We got to the last song and did the horn fill and into the second verse. And the music started and there was no vocal. And I grabbed the fader and shoved it. And all I heard then was, "I'm sorry." And Thelma had locked up and didn't remember the opening line on the second verse. And of course, I pushed the button and said, "That's okay, sweetie. It was a great one. You'll do it even better this time." And then just went, "Oh my God." And so pressure and tension, but I loved it. I loved it to pieces.
Can you share any elements of the Miles Davis mix record that you mixed, and also the Marvin Gaye record that you worked on? Are there any interesting tidbits when you had that in your hand? What did it feel like?
The first thing I did with Marvin Gaye was a live recording in Oakland, Marvin Gaye Live, oddly enough. And I had been a big Marvin Gaye fan, and that was just a really great live band. It was the best R&B band you could put together up there. But it was a one-shot, which I had done a couple of years earlier with Streisand. She did one, Barbra Streisand live at the Forum. One shot meaning they're rehearsed in the afternoon, you record it at night. So there you go. And that's what it was with Marvin's album. And I had mixed some things for Motown and never got credit. I always got special thanks. And I was really ticked about it. So when I met with Suzanne DePass at Motown about doing Marvin's album, I said, "I just have 2 requests. One, that I get credit on the album, and 2, that I get to a shot at mixing it. If he doesn't want to use my mix, that's fine, but at least I want a shot." And she said, "Absolutely." Well, 1 out of 2 isn't bad. No, I didn't get to mix it. And but what's funny is that long after that album, Motown was sold, and the people that took it over had a special products girl, and she decided, and I have no idea why, she decided to have that album remixed and had me remix it. So I've never heard of another situation where there was a very successful album, I think it was platinum, where they, 20 years later, they remix it. But I was sure glad they did. The funny thing about that is that, when I got the tape boxes in my studio and I looked, your handwriting doesn't really change. Mm-hmm. And I saw my handwriting hadn't changed. Well, your sense of humor doesn't either, because in that great R&B band, there was a horn section and some strings. And for the 2 tracks that the strings were on, there was an asterisk. And I had the key to the asterisk down below was "Good luck with that." Because there was no way you were going to get a very decent string sound with that band going. So, but that was kind of fun. And then the other thing, which could take up your whole show to talk about, but the album that I'm really the happiest with, one of the highlights for me, is an album that Marvin did in 1965. I didn't know this until I got called to do this. album, but he was a big fan of the Sinatra type singers when he got started, and that's what he wanted to do.
Guy.
And he so he started an album in 1965 and got 7 songs into it and called it, because he wasn't enjoying what he was doing. He just said, I haven't lived enough life. I can't put the emotion that these songs need. So he did that, and then he transferred that a few years later to 8-track and had some more, because it was 3-track then. The orchestra, the band was recorded in stereo, and he was on the center track. Mm-hmm. So several years down the road, he did 8-track. He was able to go in and play around with some more. He still wasn't happy. And then in 1979, when he had his own studio, it was transferred to 24-track, and he went in and did all the vocals and background vocals in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it's the amazing thing about that album is, by then he had developed his singing style, especially with backgrounds. And those kind of albums never had backgrounds, anything like what are on that album. So I just think it's a fabulous album. Can't say enough about it. Miles, unfortunately, the 2 records I did, he was never there. It was Marcus Miller, fabulous, one of my favorite musicians on the planet. Great, and so the mix was with him. I did go to Europe a couple of years after that to record a live album with with Miles on all the European festivals. And I did do that. So I did get to meet him and hear him blowing every night. But for some reason, they never finished the album, never put it out until he died, which is one of my sore subjects. I can't stand when artists die that whoever, usually the families, but whoever come in and start taking stuff that they didn't have approval of and putting it out. And that's exactly what happened with that album of Miles. Is people came in and did it. I didn't have anything to do with the mixing, and I don't know where it ended up or whatever, but I just heard that they took it over and were mixing it.
Okay, I'm gonna take some liberties and tease you, okay?
Okay.
So your studio, Ron Lancashire, I used to drive by it every day and park next to it every day for 20 years because I was at Larrabee, maybe not 20, maybe 15. And I would always go, okay, today I'm going to knock on the door. I never did. But the word on the street is, and here's where I'm going to tease you, it could be considered the world's greatest bedroom studio ever because you built everything from scratch. You had control over everything. You were the only person that mainly worked there. And you built the console from scratch, the preamps from scratch. And if that's not the ultimate bedroom studio, because I'm sure you slept there, I don't know what is.
I never did sleep there. I did have one regret that when I built the men's room, there was a toilet and 2 urinals. And I thought maybe we should only have 1 urinal and a shower for those long kind of sessions, but never did that. But yeah, it's true. That's the guy that taught me all the basics, Toby Foster, and I always had a dream of building a studio. And when I was financially able to do it, that's what we did. And all of my favorite consoles that I had worked on were basically, homemade. And I really felt that we could build a more transparent, colorless console than anything we could buy. Mm-hmm. And I do believe we did it. Mm-hmm. The concept was that if you have the most important thing to me was to have a great sounding room, because I grew up in the 70s with rooms that had become dead boxes because after multitrack came out, leakage became a bad word. Mm-hmm. Before that, when everyone was playing in the room together, the rooms were built in the 50s and 60s so that they gave something to the ensemble. Mm-hmm. But now that everyone wanted separation, they built the rooms very dead so that this instrument sound wouldn't get across the room. Unfortunately, this instrument sound in his microphone, especially drums, it's a dead sound, which of course was the sound of 70s drums, but I wanted ambience. So I told the architect when we built it, I don't know how to get it. I'm going to know when we get it. And if we don't get it the first time, we're going to tear it out and do it again, because that's the main reason I'm building a room. And as I always say, with seat of the pants and prayer, we got right out of the box, we got 90% of it. And I called one of the acoustical engineers, came down and told me how to fix the 10%. But yeah, we built the console from scratch. And that's one of those things that when you get done with it and you wish now if we could do the real one, because you learned so much doing the first one. But it all came out pretty darn good. So anyway, I've interrupted myself, which is not unusual. The concept of the studio was a great room with great mics, and I had assembled a huge mic collection of vintage tube microphones before we built it through the 70s, where I bought, like, the first one that I discovered was the 251. And I paid $400 and $500 for about the first 7 of them. The first 7. Then in 1980, as I was building the studio, I had a friend that wanted to sell a pair. I paid $3,000 for 2 mics, and I bitched about it for 6 months. It was unbelievable.
Now they're like crazy.
I'm not bitching anymore. Anyway, but a great room with great mics and as colorless, transparent a console as you can get will give you the most natural sound. There's plenty of boxes, and now, of course, plugins, but there's plenty of boxes to change the sound and, do something different if you want with the sound. But there's nothing that'll take it back the other way. Yeah. And so that's why we did it the way we did it. And the console, not only did we build it, but it was built transformerless, single-ended, as it were, without any transformers. Again, because transformers, which we all know, color the sound, and we use boxes specifically to get those colors. But I figured I'd start with the most colorless console we could do, and then you could do whatever you want after the fact.
About that time in the industry, we know it as the great Celotex. Is it Celotex or Celebrex?
Celotex.
The great Celotex shortage in America took place. Why were you so adamant about trying to find Celotex to work in that room when everybody's using 703?
Because,
by the way, I'm trying to make a joke here, but I failed. So,
well, I don't know. Because a lot of people would ask that completely straight-faced and mean it. I personally, it starts with Richie Podler's studio, which one portion of it was Celotex, so I knew that. But as I went through the 70s and started, getting better and better, as an engineer, I would visit old studios, and I noticed that every old studio that used Celotex, and every radio studio that used it, even a radio studio, which are super dead, where it's on all the walls, it's not an anechoic dead. It's dead, but it doesn't hurt your ears. And obviously, 703 is they make anechoic chambers out of it, for crying out loud. So it's just too dead. So that's why the Celotex, as it turns out, it's funny enough, its biggest absorption is somewhere around 1K, which is not a terrible thing to take out a little bit, but it's very reflective up as it goes up. So yeah, that was I committed to do that. I actually talked to 2 of the best acoustical engineers in the business, and I said, I want a room with a sound like the ones, that were built in the 50s and so on. And they started talking about coefficients of this and that, instead of just saying, yeah, we can do it, no problem. And I just got nervous. So that's why I decided to do it myself.
You're known for your open top, your tight bottom, and a mid-range Fletcher Munson would be proud of. How do you attain those, and what type of equipment would you go to first? Say, let's break it up into 2 parts. To get a real clear open top end, a lot of consoles don't have that. How did you manage to do it on your work? Was it a function of your console?
Well, of course. That was the whole point of that with the console. Prior to that, I would just do whatever I could to get it. Now, funny enough, when you talk about that top end, that's what I love about the 251 is the transparent top end that it has. It's just, nice and silky up there. And then I found my way to the Trident A-range console, which again, that the high end on that equalizer is really
not many
the
left.
Same thing. So you hit the nail on the head. That's one of the main things that I was going after. Now, the Trident wasn't as punchy on the bottom as I would like, but then again, we were talking before we went live about the B&B equalizer, which is what I chose. In building the console was enough of a challenge, but to design an equalizer would have been just too much. So I decided to go with the B&B primarily for the bottom end, because it had much better bottom end than the other option, which would have been a 550A. The top end on it wasn't quite as good, but as I wanted, but
It was good
yeah,
for backgrounds, and I liked on backgrounds.
You just try to pick the best. It was all about figuring out what different tools serve, what they serve you, and using them, trying to seek them out.
Yeah, I had access to a Soundtech one time, and I thought that had a nice, really open top end.
Yeah, the multi-band, the two rack space. Yeah. Well, that's the second. The first one, that's Massenburg, the design. The first one is, for me, George will argue and does, is the ITI, and which very, very similar. And for me, and hope George never listens to this, they go straight down. The ITI does the best, then the Soundtech, and then the GML. Yeah. But yeah, those are excellent. All of them are excellent.
Yeah. And then two things. Give me a commentary on today's use of low end, and compare that to how the tight low end that you were getting on some of your records. Your records had a cohesive, all the frequencies worked together. There wasn't any frequency covering up another frequency. They all had their little range to play in. And I've tried my whole career to try and get that, and I'm not there yet, but I'm getting closer though. So the bottom end, let's focus on that. How'd you get that tight?
How do I do anything? Just the funny thing, because I've been asked just the other day, someone else is suggesting, why don't you teach? And I just don't have that gene, because so much of it is just instinctive. It's instinctual. Yeah. I just don't know. I know that Richie Podler, in 1969, had some excellent bottom end. And so when I left his studio, I got fooled. I didn't know it at the time. I went to a brand new studio that looked great and had all this wonderful equipment, but I couldn't get a bass drum sound to save my life. I even he used a funky little, I think it was an Electro Voice mic. I even went and bought one of those, and that didn't work. I hadn't figured out that everything is in a chain is relative to everything else. So, but I just always tried to sculpt. I love drums. I'm a wannabe drummer, and I love drums. So I always, worked on having a good drum sound, and then the bass has to sit down there with the bass drum, and I just try to, I don't know how to say, I just try to record and then equalize, or whatever you do to make them compress, whatever you do to make them work together.
I think the process is whatever you want to hear in your head. Eventually, if you're tenacious enough and dedicated enough, you will eventually, maybe 10 to 20,000 hours later, you will get it to come through a pair of speakers eventually.
Yeah. There's obviously, young people coming up, there's a lot of experimentation. We all did it, we all had to do it. That's the only way, even, back in those dark ages, when I was young and you were younger, we had the ability to get a job in a studio and work your way up. And, when you were able to become a second engineer, you got to sit there and watch, a bunch of engineers and see how they did what they did, so you could figure out how to do it for yourself. But whenever you get out and finally start doing it, you try something and it wasn't bad, and you try something else. Ooh, that's worse. And that's what you got to do.
So I'm going to ask you a question about an impossible question. What question have you not been asked in your career that you'd like me to ask now?
Wow. I can't think of something offhand.
Well, so I did that good of an interview that I covered all the questions that you...
Yeah, I think so. I wish you'd asked me that ahead of time. I'd like to give that some thought. I can't think of it offhand.
Let's do this. We'll go to batter's box, and then of course you won't think of it because you have to think of something else. But I don't know. I've always wanted to be asked that question myself. Okay, so
wait a minute.
Okay.
What question has no one ever asked you, Dave?
Oh, why is it that I don't go out to pasture and stud? Why do I still mix every day and enjoy it more than ever, and I can't stop? And I'm pretty sure I'll die at my I don't have a console now, but at my desk, I'm sure I'll die there.
That's funny.
Hopefully later rather than sooner. And my answer is the music, music's a gift from God. It's biblical, and all of God's favorite people, or most of them, were actually musicians. And music has something that can't be had through any other vitamin or any other exercise or any other meditation. It's a wonderful gift, you know.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more, and I made it very clear in my book. But I'm right with you there. There's something else that we have in common, because my joke is always, I mean, I'm so fortunate that I'm in very good health. I've got all the energy I ever had. Mm-hmm. I love what I do. I love doing it. And it's my hobby. It's my vocation. And I've always said, you know, my dream is to drop dead on the console. It'd be something like, guys, you know, the second verse. Anyway.
Would you prefer to die with Pro Tools running or working a console?
Yeah, I don't care. As long as there's music coming out of those speakers and I can manipulate it, I'm there.
That was kind of morbid on my part. You want to try this batter's box thing?
Sure.
Okay. So essentially, it's a stream of consciousness. Whatever comes to your mind, one word, real quick. So
I'm warning you. This is a distorted piece of equipment up here. So beware of what might happen.
Well, we'll get along fine, because aquí también. Me too. Preamps.
Oh boy. Tube.
Melodies.
Fabulous.
Guitars.
Love them. Wish I understood them better.
Major key or minor key?
Depends on your mood. Both are fabulous.
Reverb.
Oh, love it. Love it. Love it. Chamber first, EMT second, and now everything that is just mostly what we use in the digital world, but love it.
Loops.
Great, fun, new technology, not new anymore, but you know, something really added to music.
Guitar pedals.
Too many.
Strings.
Love them. Absolute love them. Prettiest part of the orchestra.
I've never recorded an orchestra. I wish I could.
I love recording orchestras.
Tubes.
Tubes?
Yeah.
Yes. Just yes. I think there's something, you know, magical about tubes with transducers, either microphones or speakers. Just love them.
Yeah. Also, too, I don't know why I'm going to say this. It has It has nothing to do with anything. But that's my charm, is saying things that have nothing to do with anything. But during a nuclear attack, only the equipment with tubes will still be working, because they're adverse and exempt from the issues we get from radiation. So all our tube gear will still be working. And last but not least, what's the least expensive piece of equipment that you've used on a record that you liked?
Yes, SM57.
Yeah, great on drums. Well, my friend did a great job. Jimmy Cliff, the album that had Follow My Mind. That was the album that you mixed, and there was a version of him doing No Woman, No Cry, and that's you know, saying that that's my favorite version over Marley is blasphemous, but
yeah,
I love that mix. Was there anything unusual or interesting about that session? Because
no.
Jimmy Cliff is one of my favorite artists of all time.
Oh, that's wild. No, actually, a guy named Trevor Lawrence, I believe, produced it, and it was just early. That's early on, huh? Early 70s, right?
Yeah. It was right around the time he did Many Rivers to Cross and those types of songs.
I remember I was mixing in Sound Labs, Armin Steiner's studio at the time, another homemade console.
Let me say this: the book is a fascinating read. If you really enjoy music and you want to get better at it, there's so many invisible, intangible components to music. It's not just EQ. It's not just gear. It's the personality and the heart of the person that's making the music and helping the music get made. And so there's insight into a lot of that. I don't know if you meant to do that, but it inspired me to you know, we can't help it as engineers, but put our hands all over everything, you know. And I stopped doing it lately because sometimes, you know, today's generation falls in love with the with the demo mix or the rough mix. And, like Jason Joshua says, if you like it that much, put it out.
Yeah.
But there's one feeling I got from the book, and that's music is more than sound. It has other components, spiritual components, just make you happy components, make you sad. It's sustenance for when you get dumped. It's sustenance for when you have a great thing to celebrate. And it's way, way more than sound. And the greats always are able to get that emotion, that vibe, that feel, that groove, that energy into their work. And you're at the top of that list, my friend. So thanks for all you've done for us, particularly me and my compatriots in the audio world. You've given so much. And we're expecting a lot more.